Imagine trying to grow food in a place where water is more precious than gold and the sun scorches everything around you. How did the first human societies manage to transform barren, arid lands into fertile fields? The answer is a story of ingenuity, persistence, and an epic struggle against nature. In a world where agriculture became one of the pillars of civilization, arid regions seemed an impossible challenge. Yet in places like the Nile Valley, the Fertile Crescent, and the Sahara Desert, humans developed revolutionary techniques that not only allowed for survival, but also for the flourishing of great civilizations. Today, we'll explore how these societies faced drought and created methods that continue to influence our modern agriculture. The story begins thousands of years ago, when early farmers faced one of humanity's greatest challenges. In these harsh environments, where rainfall was scarce and unpredictable, people had to become masters of observation and adaptation. They studied the seasonal patterns, the movement of rivers, and the behavior of native plants that somehow thrived despite the harsh conditions. Think about this for a moment. While we today simply turn on a tap for water, these ancient peoples had to devise ingenious ways to capture, store, and distribute every precious drop. Their very survival depended on understanding the delicate balance between land, water, and sun. What's truly remarkable is how these early agricultural pioneers didn't just survive. They built thriving societies that became the cradles of human civilization. From the magnificent pyramids of Egypt to the hanging gardens of Babylon, these wonders were only possible because these cultures first mastered the art of growing food in seemingly impossible conditions. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires like this video, subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we journey back to the very roots of civilization and discover how humanity's relationship with the land shaped our entire history. It all began thousands of years ago when the first farmers faced a truly hostile environment. In arid regions across the world, water scarcity and poor soil conditions seemed like insurmountable obstacles. Just imagine trying to grow crops in a place where rain might fall only a few days each year, and the ground beneath your feet is hard, cracked, and seemingly lifeless. But these early agricultural pioneers refused to surrender to nature's harsh conditions. Instead, they began to carefully observe the natural world around them, noticing which wild plants managed to survive despite the drought, watching how water moved across the landscape after rare rainfall, and studying the cycles of nearby rivers and streams. These observations led to experimentation with techniques that would eventually change the course of human history. They discovered that by digging channels in specific patterns, precious water could be guided to thirsty crops. They learned that certain seeds planted at precise times might survive the harsh climate. With thoughtful planning and remarkable creativity, these ancient farmers accomplished what seemed impossible. They made the desert bear fruit. Here's something fascinating. Did you know that the ancient Egyptians used a technique called the shaduf to lift water from the Nile River? This brilliantly simple invention, created over 4,000 years ago, consisted of a long wooden lever with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other. A farmer could effortlessly dip the bucket into the river and then use the counterweight to help lift the water up to irrigation channels. This ingenious device allowed Egyptian farmers to water fields that were far from the river's edge, effectively expanding their agricultural lands and increasing food production throughout the kingdom. A single shaduf could lift over 700 gallons of water each day, and they became so essential to Egyptian farming that they were depicted in countless tomb paintings and hieroglyphic records. What's truly remarkable is that modified versions of the shaduf continued to be used throughout Egypt, Mesopotamia, and parts of India for thousands of years. Some rural communities in these regions still use similar water lifting devices today. Such a simple technology, yet it helped build one of history's greatest civilizations and continues to influence how we think about water management even in our modern world. One of humanity's greatest innovations was the development of irrigation systems. These weren't just simple water channels, they were complex engineering projects that transformed entire landscapes and made civilization possible in places where nature seemed determined to prevent it. Take ancient Egypt, for example. The mighty Nile River became their salvation, a lifeline flowing through an otherwise unforgiving desert. But the Egyptians didn't just settle along its banks and hope for the best. They studied the river's annual flood cycles and realized they could harness this natural phenomenon. Around 5,000 years ago, they began constructing an intricate network of canals and dikes that allowed them to control the floodwaters and direct them to their fields. The system was brilliantly designed. When the Nile flooded each year between June and September, the waters would rise and fill the canals. Farmers would open and close simple gates to control which fields received water. Then as the floods receded, the newly watered and fertilized fields were ready for planting. This method, called basin irrigation, transformed the narrow strip of land along the Nile into one of the ancient world's most productive agricultural regions. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now Iraq, the Sumerians were developing their own revolutionary approach to irrigation. Unlike Egypt, where predictable floods came annually, the Mesopotamian rivers were less reliable and often destructive. So beginning around 6,000 years ago, the Sumerians built elaborate networks of canals, levees, and reservoirs that diverted water from the rivers and stored it for controlled release. The scale of these projects was staggering. Some Mesopotamian canals stretched for dozens of miles, requiring thousands of workers to dig and maintain them. They created a checkerboard of irrigated fields that transformed the arid plains into a lush agricultural paradise, the original Garden of Eden that ancient texts describe. What's fascinating is how these irrigation systems shaped the very structure of these societies. In Egypt, the need to coordinate basin irrigation led to the development of their unified kingdom under the pharaohs. In Mesopotamia, the complex canal networks required sophisticated organization, giving rise to the world's first urban centers like Uruk and Ur. These weren't just farming techniques, they were the foundations of civilization itself. By mastering irrigation, these ancient societies didn't just ensure their survival, they created food surpluses that allowed some people to pursue other specialties, becoming artisans, priests, scholars, and rulers. Without these irrigation innovations, the Great Pyramids, ziggurats, and the earliest written languages might never have existed. Even more remarkable is that many of these ancient water management principles continue to influence modern irrigation. When you see the massive irrigation projects in California's Imperial Valley or Egypt's modern Aswan Dam system, you're witnessing the technological descendants of innovations created by farmers thousands of years ago, who first dared to reshape their environment and make the desert bloom. But water management was only half the battle. The plants themselves needed to be adapted to the harsh, arid climate. Ancient societies didn't have modern genetic engineering, but they possessed something equally powerful: patience and keen observation skills that allowed them to practice selective breeding over generations. These early agricultural scientists began by identifying wild plants that naturally survived in drier conditions. Through a process that took thousands of years, they carefully selected and cultivated species that could thrive with minimal water, gradually transforming wild grasses into productive crops that would become the foundation of their diets. Wheat became one of the earliest success stories of this agricultural revolution. In the Fertile Crescent region around 8,000 years before Christ, farmers began cultivating wild einkorn and emmer wheat varieties that could mature quickly during brief rainy seasons. These early wheat varieties didn't produce the high yields we see today, but they were remarkably resilient to drought conditions. Barley proved even more valuable in many arid regions because it could tolerate saltier soils and required about 20% less water than wheat. Archaeological evidence from ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia shows that barley was often the preferred crop in the driest farming areas. In fact, barley was so important in ancient Mesopotamia that workers were often paid in barley rations, and the earliest written records were frequently tallies of barley stores. In Africa, indigenous farmers domesticated sorghum and millet, two extraordinary grains that can survive in conditions that would kill most other crops. Sorghum, with its deep root system and waxy coating on its leaves to reduce water loss, became particularly important across the Sahel region. These crops didn't just survive drought, they were adapted to expect it. What's particularly fascinating is how these early farmers developed sophisticated knowledge about which crops to plant together. They discovered that certain combinations of plants actually helped each other survive. For instance, in what would later become the American Southwest, native peoples planted the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, together. The corn provided a stalk for the beans to climb, the beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, and the squash leaves created shade that kept the soil from drying out too quickly. This companion planting made agriculture possible in one of North America's driest regions. The domestication of these drought-resistant plants represents one of humanity's greatest achievements. These weren't just new food sources, they became the foundation of entire civilizations. The surplus food these crops provided allowed for the development of complex societies, specialized labor, written language, and monumental architecture. Without these hardy plants, the great empires of the ancient world might never have existed. Even today, as we face growing challenges from climate change and water scarcity, agricultural scientists are turning back to these ancient, drought-resistant varieties to find solutions for our future food security. The wisdom of those early farmers, passed down through thousands of years, may hold the key to feeding our planet in increasingly uncertain times. So did you know that the Egyptians used a lever device called the shadoof to irrigate their fields? Pretty ingenious, right? If you're enjoying this video, please hit that like button, share it with friends who love history, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more incredible stories about our ancient past. And let us know in the comments, which ancient agricultural technique do you find most impressive? Is it the massive irrigation systems, the shadoof, or perhaps the selective breeding of drought-resistant crops? We'd love to hear your thoughts. These remarkable innovations didn't just allow for mere survival, they sparked the rise of humanity's greatest civilizations. The mastery of agriculture in extreme conditions transformed what should have been uninhabitable deserts into the cradles of human achievement and innovation. Ancient Egypt stands as perhaps the most spectacular example of this transformation. By harnessing the Nile's annual floods and cultivating drought-resistant crops, the Egyptians built a civilization that lasted for over 3,000 years. Their agricultural surplus supported a complex society of priests, scribes, artisans, and builders who created some of humanity's most enduring monuments. The Great Pyramids of Giza, which still amaze us today, were only possible because Egyptian farmers had solved the puzzle of desert agriculture. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians rose to prominence through their mastery of irrigation. Their sophisticated canal systems turned the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers into a breadbasket that supported the world's first urban centers. The city of Uruk, around 5,000 years ago, grew to house more than 40,000 people, an unprecedented concentration of humanity made possible only through agricultural innovation. What's truly fascinating is how these agricultural breakthroughs shaped every aspect of these societies. In Egypt, the predictable flooding of the Nile led to a stable, centralized kingdom. In contrast, the unpredictable rivers of Mesopotamia required constant maintenance of irrigation systems, leading to the development of the world's first complex bureaucracies and written records to manage water resources. Even religious beliefs were shaped by these agricultural realities. The Egyptian gods reflected the reliability of the Nile, with deities associated with predictable cycles of renewal. Mesopotamian religions, however, often featured more capricious gods, mirroring their less predictable rivers and the constant threat of floods or drought that could destroy canal systems overnight. The influence of these ancient agricultural societies extended far beyond their borders. Their techniques spread through trade and conquest, reaching across continents. The Nabateans, for example, learned from Egyptian and Mesopotamian methods and created their own remarkable water harvesting systems in what is now Jordan. Their capital city of Petra, carved into rose-colored sandstone cliffs, featured ingenious channels and cisterns that captured every precious drop of the region's scarce rainfall. The Romans, too, adopted and expanded upon these ancient techniques. Their aqueducts, which stretched across the Mediterranean world, were direct descendants of earlier Middle Eastern irrigation systems. When the Romans conquered North Africa, they implemented agricultural methods that transformed parts of what is now Libya and Tunisia into the breadbasket of their empire. This legacy continues to influence us today. Modern drip irrigation, now used worldwide, draws on principles first developed in ancient times. The terraced fields seen across Asia have their conceptual roots in the water management systems of the ancient Middle East. Even the massive dams and irrigation projects of modern Egypt, Iraq, and India are in many ways simply scaled-up versions of what began thousands of years ago. Perhaps most importantly, as our world faces increasing challenges from climate change and water scarcity, archaeologists and agricultural scientists are studying these ancient techniques with renewed interest. The wisdom of those who first learned to farm in Earth's most hostile environments may hold solutions for our future. In a beautiful historical symmetry, the very first agricultural innovators may help us solve our most pressing modern challenges. But make no mistake, these victories against the harsh desert environment didn't come easily. For every success story we've explored, there were countless moments of crisis when entire civilizations teetered on the edge of collapse. The history of agriculture in arid regions is equally a tale of human resilience in the face of nature's most brutal challenges. Archaeological evidence tells us of devastating multi-year droughts that struck these ancient societies without warning. Around 2200 years before Christ, a catastrophic century-long drought descended upon Mesopotamia and Egypt simultaneously. The mighty Akkadian Empire, which had unified much of Mesopotamia, crumbled as their sophisticated canal systems ran dry. Clay tablets from this period describe desperate measures. For 3 years the fields were not watered. The people sold their children for silver. Even the stable Egyptian civilization wasn't immune to nature's fury. Inscriptions from the first intermediate period describe a terrible drought that lasted for decades. All of Egypt was dying of hunger to such a degree that everyone had come to eating their children. While this account may be exaggerated, archaeological evidence confirms that prolonged droughts during this period led to political collapse and social upheaval as the central government failed to ensure adequate food supplies. Ironically, too much water could be just as devastating as too little. In Mesopotamia, unpredictable flooding could destroy years of work overnight. A single violent flood might wash away dikes, fill irrigation canals with silt, and saturate fields with so much salt that they became unfarmable for generations. Records from ancient Ur describe one such disaster. The fields are flattened, the earth is washed away, our canals are filled with mud, our storehouses empty. These societies also faced the constant threat of salinization, a process where irrigation gradually increases the salt content in soil until crops can no longer grow. This invisible enemy destroyed farmland throughout Mesopotamia. Over centuries, wheat fields had to be converted to more salt-tolerant barley, and eventually many became completely barren. Some scholars believe that salinization contributed significantly to the decline of Sumerian civilization around 4,000 years ago. Yet what's truly remarkable is how these ancient farmers persisted despite these challenges. They developed early warning systems, carefully monitoring distant rainfall and river levels. The nilometers of ancient Egypt, stone structures that measured the height of the annual flood, allowed officials to predict food production months in advance and allocate resources accordingly. They also created the world's first seed banks. Archaeological excavations have uncovered carefully preserved seed stores in Egypt and the Middle East, with different varieties kept separate, an ancient form of risk management, ensuring that if one crop failed, alternatives were available. Perhaps most impressively, these societies developed sophisticated political and social systems to manage risk. The Egyptian pharaohs maintained massive granaries that stored enough grain to feed the population for years during times of famine. In Mesopotamia, complex legal codes included provisions for debt forgiveness during agricultural disasters, preventing farmers from falling into permanent slavery after crop failures. This struggle against time and nature wasn't just a physical battle, but a race of innovation, each new technique extending humanity's ability to survive in hostile environments. And while these civilizations eventually fell for various reasons, their agricultural innovations persisted, passed down through generations, spreading across continents and evolving to meet new challenges. The story of agriculture in arid lands is, at its heart, one of human determination, a refusal to accept nature's limitations, and a testament to our species' remarkable ability to adapt, innovate, and persevere even in the most challenging environments on Earth. Today, in a world grappling with water scarcity and the accelerating impacts of climate change, the lessons from these ancient societies have taken on renewed urgency. What once seemed like distant history now feels remarkably relevant to our most pressing global challenges. As we face predictions that nearly 2/3 of the world's population could experience water shortages by the year 2030, scientists and agricultural experts are increasingly turning to the past for inspiration. The innovative spirit of those first desert farmers resonates across millennia, offering wisdom that modern technology can amplify but not replace. In Morocco's Atlas Mountains, local communities are reviving an ancient water harvesting technique called Katara, underground tunnels that tap into groundwater and transport it for miles with no pumps or electricity. This system, first developed in ancient Persia over 2,000 years ago, is now being restored and expanded with modern materials. Engineers have discovered that these gravity-powered water systems are often more sustainable and resilient than modern electric pumps that deplete aquifers rapidly. Across the Middle East, traditional water harvesting systems called qanats and aflaj are being incorporated into contemporary water management plans. In Oman, the ancient Falaj irrigation systems, some dating back more than 4,000 years, still provide water to date palm plantations. The Omani government now protects these systems as both cultural heritage and practical infrastructure, recognizing their continued value in a water-scarce future. Even NASA has studied ancient agricultural techniques. Their scientists have examined the remarkable terraced fields of the pre-Incan civilizations in Peru's coastal deserts. These ancient systems used precisely angled terraces to capture morning fog, transforming moisture that would otherwise evaporate into a reliable water source. Today, fog catchers, large mesh nets that harvest water from mist, are being deployed in arid coastal regions from Chile to Morocco, inspired by these ancient innovations. In the realm of crop science, modern plant breeders are rediscovering ancient drought-resistant varieties that were nearly lost to history. The International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas has established a seed bank containing thousands of traditional crop varieties from arid regions worldwide. These ancient strains, many domesticated thousands of years ago, often contain genetic traits for drought and heat resistance that modern commercial varieties lack. What's particularly fascinating is how these ancient techniques are being combined with cutting-edge technology. In Israel's Negev desert, researchers have studied ancient Nabatean farming methods that collected runoff from brief desert rains. They've now enhanced these techniques with modern materials and precise computer modeling, creating agricultural systems that can produce crops with just 3 inches of annual rainfall without irrigation. Perhaps most poignantly in Iraq and Syria, the lands of ancient Mesopotamia, farmers are returning to traditional drought-resistant crops and water management techniques as war and climate change have damaged modern infrastructure. Ancient varieties of barley and wheat, along with traditional water-sharing systems, are proving more resilient in these troubled times than their modern counterparts. These connections between past and present remind us that human ingenuity isn't just expressed through creating the new, but also through rediscovering and adapting the wisdom of the past. As we face an uncertain climate future, the ancient farmers who first learned to make the desert bloom may yet have much to teach us. Their most important lesson might be one of perspective and patience. These ancient societies thought in terms of generations and centuries, building irrigation systems meant to last for hundreds of years and developing crops through careful selection over decades. In our fast-paced world, this long-term thinking may be their most valuable gift to us as we confront environmental challenges that will define not just our lives, but the lives of countless generations to come. Agriculture in arid regions stands as one of humanity's greatest achievements, a testament to our species' remarkable ability to overcome seemingly impossible odds. These ancient farmers didn't just survive in hostile environments, they transformed barren landscapes into cradles of civilization that changed the course of human history. Their story teaches us that the barriers we perceive as insurmountable can often be overcome through observation, experimentation, and unwavering persistence. When the ancient Egyptians first looked at the harsh desert surrounding the Nile, they didn't see only limitations, they saw possibilities. When Mesopotamian farmers faced salinization of their fields, they didn't abandon agriculture, they adapted by developing new cultivation methods and salt-tolerant crops. This mindset, this refusal to accept nature's limitations as final, may be the most valuable lesson these ancient societies offer us today. As we confront climate change, water scarcity, and the need to feed nearly 8 billion people, we would do well to channel the same innovative spirit that allowed our ancestors to make the desert bloom thousands of years ago. The archaeological evidence from these ancient agricultural societies reveals something profound about human nature. And time and again, when faced with environmental challenges that threatened their very existence, our ancestors responded not with despair, but with ingenuity. The Shaduf lifting water from the Nile, the Qanat tunnels bringing water from mountains to valleys, the carefully selected drought-resistant seeds passed down through generations. These weren't just technologies, but expressions of hope and determination. And perhaps that's the most important connection between those ancient farmers and ourselves. Like them, we face uncertain environmental futures. Like them, we must find ways to work with nature's constraints while still meeting our needs. And like them, our solutions will require not just technical innovation, but social cooperation and long-term thinking. So what do you think we can learn from these ancient societies to help us face the challenges of our future? Is it their water management techniques, their careful crop selection, or perhaps their ability to plan and build for generations yet unborn? How might the wisdom of those who first learned to farm in Earth's harshest environments help us navigate our own uncertain times? If you enjoyed this journey through the origins of agriculture in arid lands, please hit that like button. Share this video with friends who appreciate history's hidden lessons, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more fascinating content about the ancient world. From the earliest civilizations to the fall of empires, we're exploring the stories that shaped our shared human heritage. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of human ingenuity and perseverance. Until next time, remember that the greatest achievements in history often came from those who refused to accept that something was impossible.